I'm Gordy Kalain in the CapeCod.com News Center, joined today by a representative of the Cape Cinemas that's making its triumphant return. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Eric Hart. I'm the president of the Cape Cinema Inc. It's a profit 501c. Recently became a nonprofit in the last year and a half, and I've been associated or affiliated with the cinema since 1985, and I previously owned a corporation, which the corporation I was a shareholder with my son called Cape Cinema Group Inc., and we ran the Cape Cinema for 37 years.
All right, so you're very deeply entwined with the Cape Cinema. So recently we had that dramatic instance of the cinema having to close down, unfortunately, but the community really seems to have rallied to the cause to help get it back up and running, and it's going to be opening this week. Friday is going to be the opening time tomorrow. I believe 2:30 is the first showing after resuming operations. Do you mind just talking a little bit more about kind of like what was going on, what led to that pause, and for those who aren't familiar, some of the response essentially that you've seen, and maybe what your comments on it are specifically?
Well, I think the film industry in general has been very the box office, the grosses, the attendance at movie theaters in general has been down. I think that the art house and the specialized film industry, we're a single screen theater. We sort of specialize in foreign language films, independent American films, and sort of unusual fare. I think that end of the business got hit the hardest, and the fact that we were a non-profit and a recent non-profit, not really eligible for grants and things like that quite yet, and a combination of factors resulted in this closure.
All right. Well, now that you're back on and everything seems to be going, are you going to be keeping an eye out for potential grant stuff in the future? Is it like you have to be running for like 5 years or something before you're eligible for some of these things? Is that kind of what part of the problem is?
Some of these things, but I think we've gotten a lot of community support. We've gotten some technical assistance in that area, and I think that we've got a really strong team together right now, and I'm very hopeful for the future. I think it's going to be a future that's going to be difficult to navigate because of the industry, and the fact that we don't own the theater; it's owned by the Cape Center for the Arts. We lease it from them. A lot of single screen historic theaters, they're owned and owner operated or owned by a nonprofit, and so I mean that kind of navigating that issue financially is difficult.
So as well, you already talked about the kind of the hard issues of being an independent theater like this and focusing on those more niche films. But I mean, what is the importance of those, essentially? What role do you have as an independent theater showing foreign films or other things as opposed to like Regal Cinemas and The Avengers every other weekend or whatever? Like, what role do you guys fill, and what's the importance of these smaller theaters to you?
I think the importance is that it brings a whole other sort of film conversation to the community. I mean, there's a lot of different films that address, like for example, things like documentaries and also like special films that address certain issues and things like that, and also just sort of very character-driven small stories, which aren't really terribly accessible to a broad audience. But there's a very sort of interest in these movies, and we sort of opened that window many years ago, and it seemed to have been and continues to be on a certain level a very successful window.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, do you mind, how did you get involved in this in the first place, actually? Are you a cinemaphile yourself, or did this just happen substantially?
Not really. I love movies. I really fell in love with foreign language films when I was in college. It was a Swedish couple that ran the library film series. And, of course, there was Bergman and Fellini and all those kinds of people, directors and filmmakers that really, I found that to be very exciting. So I always sort of followed that business. And then when I grew up on the Cape, and I lived for many years in Philadelphia, come back in the summertime. and it was the Cape Cinema was beginning to play these very strange and unusual films, and I asked at the time I asked the owner if I could work there in the summertime. So for 3 years before I took the theater over, I had the opportunity to run a theater and really I was like managing the theater for someone else, and it took, and you had a good eye on what was happening with the theater and with the audience and things like that, which sometimes you wouldn't get as the owner, or because you're so involved in the day-to-day business. In this, I was just managing the theater, so I could take a look around and say, gee, this is really a really interesting place, and there really is an audience, and there's a number of things that I feel like the owner could improve upon. So I just sort of jokingly asked him if he would maybe consider selling me the theater. At the time I'm a school teacher. I don't know where the money's coming from, but he actually gave me the turn. He really wasn't doing well, and he said, if you'll take over some loans that I've taken out, you can have the theater. So so for very limited, I asked my mother for a loan, and that's how I got into business. And so I still taught school in Virginia and came back in the summertime, and I had a very competent person to manage the theater for me. And it started to really take off after 2 or 3 years, and the whole sort of idea of costume drama films that became a very big thing. So historical fiction type movies. You saw a lot of those things on public television and things like that. But they really took off. Merchant Ivory things. In fact, we're going to have a Merchant Ivory week, and the costume type dramas were really the heartland of the cinema. That was really, and then it became a big thing where independent American films started to take off, like in the 90s, really. And that also played in very well to the cinema, and a lot of documentaries too as well, things that you just wouldn't see in a commercial theater.
Now, as well, Eric, as a cinemaphile myself, I would just love nothing more than just to discuss the film industry of America for the next 45 minutes. But to keep it on track for now, so we're kicking off with Thelma. That's the first that we're going to be returning to. But are there some other films that you kind of wanted to highlight as part of this upcoming season?
There's a film. The next film is going to be Horizons. That's the Kevin Costner Western. That's going to play. It's playing in a lot of theaters. I sort of traditionally in the summertime would play like a high-profile commercial film that would, that also appeals to a broader, even somewhat older audience. And, the Costner film seems to play that role. And there's another film, it's called Touch. It's coming. It's this wonderful film, Japanese film about it's about an older man who looks back on his life living in London, and it's really an amazing film. It's more like an epic than just a movie, and it's and anyone who's familiar with Murakami, who is a Japanese writer, it's kind of it has that sort of very literal feel to it. That's coming. I'm very excited about that. That's mid-July. And then was another film called Sing Sing, which is about prisoners in I guess you'd call like a high security prison, who form a theater and do Shakespeare. And it's sort of this ensemble group of prisoners that find meaning in life through the theater, and it's based on a true story. And it's a dramatic feature, but it's based on a true story. So those are some of the things we're also going to do. We're going to do the summer series that we always do with the Met Opera has summer repeats that they do, and we're doing like exhibition on the screen on art series. And we're going to do some other, I'm sure we'll do some music films, and, we'll throw in a horror film here and there. I don't see us doing that on a regular basis, but I do see us, and I think what we're going to do very soon is going to send out a survey and survey people and discuss some of this, sort of develop, become more community engaged, so that the community, so we're playing things that the community wants to see, and reach out to filmmakers, either local filmmakers or filmmakers that have like unusual films. Do this a lot, where the filmmaker brings a movie in, just shows a one-off screening and does a QA after Q&A, question and answer after the movie, and that's been very successful. And I would like to expand some of those ideas.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially considering the community support has been so integral in getting this back up and running, that it is interesting to kind of see, like, going forward,
it's been
like,
incredible.
how can we do that?
I mean, the community is just, we had a Saturday event where we invited people to come, really just to have a conversation with the community, and well over 300 people showed up. They just jammed into the theater, and very enthusiastic crowd, like a lot of support. People wrote checks and really helped us, get our feet back under us. And we just appreciate. I want to just give a big shout out to the community and say what a wonderful, wonderful job they have done to support us. And now it's our turn to show them that we deserve that support.
All right, Eric, sounds awesome. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. That's about all the time that I have, but is there anything else you wanted to highlight for our listeners while I still have you?
Just that we're still trying to make the cinema sustainable, and we certainly would appreciate any financial support, because we want to keep the Cape Cinema going. We want this isn't a short-term thing. This is a long-term, sustainable institution, and we want to keep it that way. So you can reach out on CapeCinema.com and send in your support. We really will appreciate it, and come to the movies. That's the main thing.
All right, awesome, Eric. As well, for those of you listening, we will have the link to the Cape Cinema in the description for this interview. Eric, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to whatever that horror movie might be. I'm a big horror movie buff myself, so please keep me in the know. But otherwise, thank you so much, and I will let you go.
Right. Goodbye.